Okay, everybody, welcome to GRIDwrap Monday night from Metaverse Island. We have with us our usual guest of Tessa Harrington, Spot on 3D. And in our guest, we have Nigma Sterling, a Rockcliffe professor, although he's here today. Aren't you, Nigma, in your own capacity, I believe?
Yes.
Okay. How are you? You feeling nervous or are you fine?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, cool. How are you, Tessa? What's been happening in your world in the last couple of days?
Toggling my button on and off. Yeah, waiting to talk. Yeah. I'm doing great. How about you?
Well, today's subject, we decided after the shenanigans on the Second Life grid and in-worlds, in fact, as well, that we would address the subject to some extent of internet security today, or securities on the grid. And Tessa, something's happened just before we came on air, hasn't it, at in-worlds, I believe?
Yeah, over the weekend they had a DDoS attack, and we don't know if it's a coinky dink or what, but it came shortly after supposedly they made an announcement about not using Emerald on their grid, that they were recommending not to. So some people are thinking it's in a response to that, or retaliation. But it took them down for 2 days, I heard from somebody who is a resident over there, and took down their website too. But I also think they're like restructuring, because it sounded like they're having to rebuild their whole grid system. But it may be because I think it's because they're probably instigating new security procedures that are a little bit more protective of their residents, which is always a good thing, in retrospect. But apparently their website went down again today, as they're trying to implement these new standards. So, but the person I was talking to was trying to get an island, and they're not having too much luck fulfilling the order. But I'm sure Emeralds will get it back together soon. But we all feel for them, because none of us wants to see one of our, successful grids go down, because they're all, a good story for us as an industry, if they handle all their business professionally.
Okay. Nigma, do you have a special interest in security?
Well, I do the estate management for Rockcliffe University and several other places. And I have been teaching people how to avoid griefers, take care of griefers, the mentality behind griefing and stuff like that for actually quite a while now.
Okay, let's talk about the mentality behind the griefing, because the Emerald, for viewers who aren't in Second Life, but out there on the net, Emerald is a viewer that is used for Second Life and some other grids as well, I believe. And it's had a security breach with some malicious code put into it, in fact, by one of the Emerald team, who is now no longer with them. And it's kind of created a schism with the Emerald team. They have been restructuring, they've been cleaning their product, and several other products have come out at the same time, and now people within Second Life are wondering where to go next. But it's really interesting that you bring up the subject of the mentality of griefing. Can we hear some more about that, Nigma? What do you think it is?
Well, honestly, a lot of times it's just it's a a thing of attention, gathering. Griefers don't grief sims or grids that there's nobody in. I mean, why do it? I took down a sim. Yeah, but nobody was there. I mean, that's like making the hole-in-one on the par 7 hole, and nobody's there to witness it. It didn't happen.
Yeah, makes sense.
A lot of them do that. A lot of them, it's a political thing in their own little cliques and things like that. A lot of times, other times I've had it. Pure accident. You get somebody who's a noob who got something from somebody, they take it out, put it on the ground, and it's a replicating cube. They don't know what to do with it. They're 0 days old. So they leave. Well, basically, that person's now being considered a griefer because, of something that they did. So
I call them bully boxes. Because they sit there and they replicate and push you around, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a couple on. We had a couple of those, we think, on the grid yesterday, on the sim yesterday here. We're not quite sure why. All sorts of reasons are posited, but I mean, if you're talking about attention, we were busy.
Yep.
It's right, but it seems to me that the best defense is not to have anybody on your sim. Is that right?
Well, there's a lot of other defenses. I mean, you can sit there and you can basically have nobody on your sim, but that's kind of like, well, the best way to avoid viruses is to unplug your computer. It's some things that I suggest to people is, first of all, if you're going to have several parcels on your sim, make them, no object entry. So that way, if a griefing does happen on one sim, it stays, or one parcel, it stays contained to that parcel.
Oh, good point.
And also, don't have object res. I mean, don't have it to where strangers can object res. Group members, that's fine. Strangers, Unfortunately, I help run a sandbox at Rockcliffe University. We can't have either of those, so we have to be on constant vigilance for people coming in.
Wow, that must be a big job, huh? Keep you busy?
Oh yeah, it keeps me and Tender Sky Tower, the assistant to the dean. We're both there along with IAPL security, run by Randy Hooker. We actually, all of us, one big team, and we take care of things when it needs to be done.
So tell me, in the wider scheme of things, out on the net, we've been talking kind of specifically to Second Life, haven't we, so far? But as we've heard already, that it's moved out of Second Life to in-worlds have been brought down, but also the kind of griefing attack, if you like to say, with the malicious code in Emerald was actually against, ended up affecting a web page that had nothing to do with any of us, as far as I know. So what can people do about that? I mean, is this a growing phenomenon? I can't say. I never been
phenomenon.
Phenomenon. Well, actually, it's easier to say in American, isn't it? Phenomenon.
Phenomena.
Yeah, don't try and say it in the UK. It's impossible.
It is, and I think it's primarily because the mentality of the people these days. A lot of them are pretty content with their first person shooters and their WoW and things like that, and basically they know that the way to frustrate somebody is by basically griefing them or trolling them or something like that. By the way, the malicious code in the Emerald has been cleaned up, but the web page that it was actually attacking did actually have something to do with Second Life. The web page actually was developing a viewer for Second Life, and it was a malicious viewer.
Oh, indeed. So,
I didn't know that.
Are we talking about, because I thought it was I Heart Anime that it was.
It is.
And that is developing a malicious
viewer. Well, he's not going to say it's malicious now, but at that point in time, it did have some instances of, well, let's say, devices that Second Life would rather you not have, and the intellectual property parties of Second Life would really rather you not have.
Okay. We know what that is. CB!
CB.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Couldn't possibly say. Copy.
Well,
nope,
I want to clarify that the DDoS code was not actually inside the client. It was on a web page, and when you start up any client, they have the choice of putting a picture or a splash screen, and the splash screen can actually be the web page. And we used to do we stopped doing that. We use an image now. Really, actually, way before this attack, we did that because we saw the vulnerability there. But the code was actually on that splash web page that they were pointing to on the client entry. So it really wasn't literally in the client. So not that makes it any better, because that just expanded their audience. So anybody who visited that web page as well would propagate the DDoS.
Right.
I think for me, saddest thing about all this, and I don't know how you feel about that, Nigma, is the fact that this young man who did this, was extremely talented. He was at the core team of Emerald, showed great promise, and this is actually in real world terms criminal behavior. He can be prosecuted for it, and he's not a minor anymore.
Well, no, he's not a minor, and he could be. But the thing is, and this is what also interests me, is that nobody has yet. Nobody's gone prosecuted, and nobody's prosecuted him. He hasn't been removed from the grid. Any of this, and I think it's primarily because everybody would rather it, go away. Because there are certain embarrassing things about the whole thing.